Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Good morning and welcome to the Encounter program. I'm Reverend Rachel Helgeson. I am the pastor at Northminster Presbyterian Church in Endwell, New York. And today is my very first hosting day on the Encounter program, and I really excited about doing that with you all. But I also wanted to introduce you to some of my friends. This is Reverend Dr. John F. Helgeson and Ann Warner. They're from the Masonville Federated congregation in Masonville, New York. And we'll talk a little bit about their congregation. This is the 200th bicentennial year for them. And also, we'll hear a little bit about their history and the interim pastor, who happens to also be, yes, if you're paying attention to last names, my dad. So we're so glad that you both are here today, and welcome to the Encounter program.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
So, Reverend Helgeson, can you talk a little bit about what it means to be an interim pastor, and especially at a federated congregation?
Interim pastors are people who come in after a pastor's left or after a time of some issues that have happened in the life of a church. And basically they are there to help a church move on. In other words, to deal with problems that have been in the past, deal with issues that have been concerns for the church, but also to make it possible for the church to have a new future and to see where it's going. So it may be just a matter of preparation for a new pastor. Sometimes it involves some dealing with some serious issues that have been involved in the life of the church and have to be dealt with and understood, and so that a church can make sense of what's going on and help it to become a better church in the future.
That must be a really wonderful thing to be able to do, but also hard too, because you're coming into a congregation for the first time and they have a history,
right?
And you're the new person into that history to help them figure out what the future might look like.
And it's a very short-term type of situation. It can run, depending on your definition of short-term, it can run for 1.5 years to 2 years. Okay. Is the typical pattern for an interim pastor.
So tell me, your denominational background is?
I happen to be Presbyterian.
And this congregation is?
Both Presbyterian and Baptist.
Okay, so can you tell me a little bit more about that? Maybe both of you could pipe in a little bit with this part of the congregation's history.
Well, it kind of all goes back to our history. We went through difficult times in the 40s, and so the two churches combined together to take care of economic situations, and it was hard at first, but when I joined the church 50 years ago, you didn't know who was Presbyterian, who was Baptist. We were
right.
just
and you
church.
said you were a new timer to the congregation, right?
Right, I am.
50 years is not a new timer, but that's okay.
It is when there's been like 100 by
right.
family, grandpas and everybody, and growing up in the same church as your extended family. So
200 years is a long time.
Yeah, that's a long time.
A lot of family history that
right.
goes along with that.
Yes,
yep.
yes.
And you actually merged about, 80 years ago?
Approximately, So it's been a long time, so you've not been aware of all the feelings that were very strong back then too.
So tell me which congregations merged together.
Well, actually the Baptist congregation and the Presbyterian congregation merged together.
Okay.
The Methodist Church stopped functioning, and they kind of came to our church because it was the only one in town.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
So, but you all have kept connections with the Presbyterian denomination and
right.
the Baptist,
right.
American Baptist. Is that what I remember?
Yes.
There's two. We still have our separate denominations, and they meet and have their meetings and do the stuff with their denominational things, and then we get together as a group and have our church.
That's wonderful. So it sounds like you all have set aside what does it mean to be denominationally related, even though you still have that identity.
Mm-hmm.
But it also sounds like you're being brothers and sisters in Christ and faith, and that's coming together.
Works well together. Both groups are very responsive and work together well, and you come together in church and you worship, and you wouldn't know which denomination you were really.
Okay, and remind me, where is Masonville on the map?
Okay. All right. Going from our area, you'd be taking 88 as if you're going toward Albany, but you'd be on 88 about 45 minutes, something like that. You can either get off at the Bainbridge exit or you can get off at the Sydney exit.
Okay.
And then you're only about 6 miles from either one of those right into Masonville.
Right. We're at the crossroads where they cross.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So a smaller community, but obviously has figured out how to come together, at least in faith. What does that, and so can you tell me a little bit about the history of the Masonville Federated congregation?
Well, that was one of the neat things that came about through this celebration, is that we began to look at our history more and make our history known to the people that are coming today. So every week on Sunday we would have a 10-minute little report of things from the past and things that had been done. So that was neat. We found a book up in the library that was an autobiography of one of our pastors from 1880 and the story of his life. And that was just amazing how a person like that became a pastor, walked every place he went practically, and it was really neat, the dedication that he had.
So he walked. I know you said you're into horses. So did he take a horse too?
Well,
or
he didn't have money probably to have a horse.
That makes sense.
He worked very, very hard. And one story in the book was he started out for Connecticut to be with his mother and his brothers and sisters in January with a loaf of bread and whatever he had in a little bag on his back in January.
In upstate New York.
In upstate New York to Connecticut. It's like, whoa. But, things were different back then. He went to people's houses and they lodged him overnight, and he went according to the weather, and it was really, really neat.
So that's really part of the history, right in the ethos of that congregation. Because I heard you, before we were talking a little bit about how the building was built and how it's become part of, can you talk a little bit about that? I know you brought some pictures.
Well, this is a picture of the Baptist church, and you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but it's very high and big. And then the other church was this one here in the middle, and that was the Presbyterian church where we are today. And for about 30 years, the congregations met in one church for 6 months and then the other church for 6 months.
Okay.
So that was a long time to get reacquainted and to be working together. The Baptist church was much harder to heat. It was a very high, big ceiling church. And so when the times got tough, this was the church that cost the most to keep going. And the church that we have today, call it our church, was a little bit lower ceiling and things like that. So they merged, and took about, like I said, 30 years to get enough closeness that they could make decisions to go ahead as a church together and not think about their individual denominations.
So if you're joining us, we're at the Encounter program today, and I'm Reverend Rachel Helgeson, and we are talking to the Masonville Federated Church, some folks from there, Ann and Reverend Helgeson, and we're talking, this is their bicentennial version. They're talking about how they became one congregation, and we're hearing a little bit about the history and also how their celebration happened. So can you tell me, I know you just had a celebration, right? Could you tell me a little bit about that? Who was invited? What happened at the celebration?
Well, we tried to invite all of our past pastors that, of course, are still around living, and we invited people from the community. We sent letters out to families that have been connected to the church but maybe were no longer in our community, and we invited friends and relatives of our own to come and celebrate with us. We had a big picnic after the church service and had a chicken barbecue.
And the service was an hour and a half, and we also did good Baptist style. We had 3 baptisms.
Oh, 3 baptisms.
3 baptisms, and used the old baptistry, and so I got to do baptisms.
So you had a Presbyterian do in the baptistry.
That's right.
Yes.
And Presbyterians can do that, is what I was told.
Yes,
I know in the Book of Common Worship it says for Presbyterians can do that, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe a little known thing that Baptists know that, but Presbyterians might not, right? So all three were in the baptistry then?
Three.
Yes.
Yeah, two children and 1 adult.
Right. And we let all the children in the congregation come up and sit around the baptistry and watch the baptism and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what a baptistry is for folks who might not know what a baptistry is?
It's almost like a giant swimming pool. Is that a good description?
That's good. Well, It's a swimming pool, but it's small.
Right.
It's in the stage, so you have to take off sections of the floor and
Then you walk down into it. Has a stairwell
steps.
down into it, and it's like I said, either like a swimming pool or a pool or a tub, something like that. It's very large, and you walk down, and it covers me almost up to my neck. So
we didn't have it that full.
But anyway, and I just take a person and ask them, who's your Lord and Savior? Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. Do you believe in him? I do. And I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
So it sounds like that goes beyond denominational things.
It does.
Yep.
That's
That's wonderful. So that was a wonderful way to be talking about 200 years of history, but also to say, here we are in this place of space now, and what we're celebrating in this moment.
And
That's
these children
wonderful.
are now the future of the church, obviously.
Absolutely. That's wonderful.
Right. It was great.
Yeah. So which pastors were present at that gathering?
We actually only had one that was able to come, a Reverend Mosier, and he's from up around the Cortland, McGraw area.
Oh, okay.
So he and his wife came over to visit with us, and that was really fun to see him.
And mention our friend who's...
Yes, we have a pastor that's retired that comes to our church, and he was doing the intern before Reverend Helgeson came. So he actually had a part in the service because...
His name?
Dave Gotchi is his
There
name.
we got there.
Yeah, and he's been with us for almost a year, but he's been with us a long time because he's been our pastor. Probably we've known him 5 or 6 years.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So it was nice, yep. And
Yeah.
he was there when we started talking, and then Reverend Helgeson came, so we combined them together
Yep.
In the service.
It worked out very well. It was an hour-and-a-half service that Sunday. Usually not that long ordinarily, but
Right.
it was that Sunday. We wanted to do some special things. Can you explain who the special visitors, the special musicians
Yes,
came?
we had the Dunnemans, who are from the Binghamton area. They were there to help in worship and singing and things like that. It was
And
awesome.
they're a duo, right?
They're a duo, yep. It was great to have them there. And the other neat thing that we did during the day, we rang the church bell 200 times.
200 times.
200 times,
Wow.
yep. So we started about 9 o'clock and ended about 3.
Okay.
And we did some half-hour ringings to all the afternoon when people were there. So it was...
So was it just one person that rang it 200 times?
No,
with their arms everywhere?
they signed up for a time to ring. And actually, we only had to pull the rope 10 times because you get 2 rings from every pull. So it was kind of neat.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
And I bet it was all ages and stages, right?
But yeah, we had some little kids that had to be helped. They wanted to ring the bell, that were like 4 or 5 years old. So it was fun. They
That's really
really
fun.
loved it.
Fun.
Yep. And it was great to hear the church bell ring over the valley.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
So you had a big part in saying, okay, it's 200 years, we should celebrate this. And what did you find when you were getting ready for this celebration that you didn't expect to find?
Well, the people were really excited about it too. As I said, we had these little reports every week during our church service, and it kind of brought people together because people remembered that they had been a part of, different things that the church has done. We have a harvest supper that we have every fall that was started back in the 1940s, and it was started as a Lord's Acre supper, and everything that the people served in that dinner were from scratch. They bought the baby chicks and raised them, and then worked together to slaughter them, and the women cooked them, and all of the potatoes and all the beets and all the squash that they had for the meal were raised in people's gardens as a dedication to God. They actually did it with that purpose in mind, that when the harvest came, they were given to the church.
So that's a really biblical theme, to talk about here are the
Exactly.
gifts that we have
Right.
of the ground, and we're going to bring this back to the church and share
Right.
it with
And
each
we're going to
other.
be doing that again this coming
you?
Yeah.
Friday.
Yep, the 27th.
So it's called Lord's
No, it's now the Harvest Supper.
Harvest Supper. Okay.
But it stemmed from that. And that
Okay.
was a national program, I think.
Oh, okay.
That the churches did. A lot of churches did that.
That's
So,
well, and that makes sense in the time frame. If you're thinking the 1940s, this would have
Right.
been people would have been through the Great Depression and
Right.
the war, and so would have understood that
yep,
we
this
need to
was a
share
time
with each other.
Yes,
And
exactly.
that's so great that your congregation still has said this is something that we.
Yeah.
And
I-
this church does some wonderful things. I mean, Ann has a after-school type of program.
Yep. Stemming from a vacation Bible school. The kids had such a good time. Would you like to learn more and come and learn more about God after school? So it really works out good.
You have a food cupboard, right?
We have a food pantry.
Food pantry.
That does very, very nice. Yep. I think that's one of the greatest things that has happened from this 200-year celebration is that we began to see the dedication and the faith of people before us and how important that is for us to carry on, and how hard they worked and gave of themselves and their so I think it's been a real faith-building experience for us.
And this is a very mission-oriented church.
I hear that.
They give quite a bit of their money, as small churches they are, to missions on a regular, constant basis.
So, I mean, even the one we were talking earlier, I heard you say that the wood people got that to get. Can you talk a little bit more about that with the wood?
I don't know. Our dedication of our expansion, our educational wing, this whole part we built on, and all of this was built by the people. They actually went to their woods and cut timber and brought it down and sawed it and did all the work on building this wing. So it's really a huge undertaking to do that. And today it would be like, you wouldn't even probably think of doing that yourselves, you know?
Right.
Yep. It was very, very uplifting for all of us, this whole celebration.
So it sounds like that's really part of the ethos of the congregation is how can we help each other, what resources do we have, how we can help other people that may not be part of here, but make sure that they're cared for as well. I
mean, they believe in helping people in the congregation, helping people outside the congregation, and they make themselves available and put the time and effort as well as the money.
So Masonville is not a very big town, right?
It's a little village. We're not even incorporated as a town. So it's a township, and a lot of our people come from out around the village too. Yeah. So
I imagine that this church is probably a central point for a lot of folks to help with different areas of their life.
I think it was a lot in the past. It may not be quite so much today because of the availability of transportation, you know.
Sure.
We went to visit some people up the road the other day, and it's about 8 miles to town, and I was telling John that people drove that far with their horse and carriages to come to church. So, you know, people came from quite a distance.
That's amazing.
And of course, Ann still has her horses. She's a horse person.
I am. So it's quite uplifting to have gone through this.
I know. In a previous congregation that I served, they talked about how transportation was a huge deal. About where that particular congregation was built was as far as the horse and buggies, and there was for one side. And they just started busing, and that's as far as the bus stop would go. Right. So if you could make it to that bus stop and were willing to walk however long you're willing to walk, then you could go to church. Otherwise, you went to the other church down the other way because this one is in the middle of the country. So sometimes it's just something we don't think about as much anymore. About we have cars, you can just get in the car, or you carpool with somebody else, and you get wherever you're going. But how far is that going to be? And 8 miles is it's a long way to go if you're just going to walk.
It would probably take a good 45 minutes. So, and people drive that today without any thinking about it.
Yep.
Right.
Is there anything else that I know we were talking a little bit about the dedication of the education wing. You said there was a pageant that they did at one point to talk about it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, when they dedicated the wing, they did a play of like the history of the church. So some of the pictures that are on there are pictures of the play that they did to amplify the history and of things that had happened at the church and in the community. So that was a neat thing. We thought about doing a play to do something of the history for our 200th year celebration, but it's a big undertaking to organize a cast and do all that work. So yes.
And I understand that you also, when the churches all came together eventually, that you got a part of the Episcopal Church, Methodist Episcopal Church.
Right. And in the dining hall and the educational wing that was dedicated, there are 2 windows that came from the Methodist Church in our dining hall.
Okay.
And we have the weather vane from the old Baptist church in our church, and just some other things to help you remember what the church we have today, what it was built from. So it's very, very neat.
And the whole concept of Federated Church means that these are related to 2 denominations.
Okay. And can you remind me, we talked about it again, but can you remind me again which denominations?
This is the American Baptist Church and the Presbyterian Church USA.
Okay.
And we do, so therefore I am, as a pastor, and related to both denominations, and am answerable to both groups, which sometimes means I have to go to meetings of both type of scenarios.
Oh.
So it takes a little more time, but
Right.
That's the thing, is to keep that connection and to keep the interrelationship going. That's who I am at this point in time.
Okay. So has that been a learning curve for you, since you come from a Presbyterian background, to do both of these things? And
No, it's I'm familiar with the Baptist traditions, and so it was not too much of a learning curve, but it's getting used to the new people and new elements who are involved in the Baptist side of the thing.
Okay. So what have you learned as far as like worship? Do you see that as kind of like a merging of the 2, or is it taking parts of the different traditions in your worship services? Because I heard you talk about, for the big celebration, you had almost an hour and a half long celebration. So I imagine, and I hear baptism as part of that. Were there other elements from both traditions that came into that celebration?
Yeah, we did the Apostles' Creed that Sunday, and we'll be doing that on an occasional basis on a regular hereafter, because that's always been important in the Presbyterian tradition. But I've noticed lately that even our Baptist friends are getting involved in that. And actually, it was our Baptist minister who recommended we use that for the 200th anniversary.
Oh, wow. Okay. I know that there's sort of a resurgence of the Apostles' Creed because it's sort of a foundational creed. And I know for some folks in the Baptist tradition are not necessarily excited about creeds, but for the Apostles' Creed can make sense because it's a very foundational early church statement. So that sounds like you're blending 2 things, but using what's in your own congregation, being federated and celebrating your 200 years, and what does that look like as a broader community of Christ, right?
Yeah, and like I say, we don't really dwell on that. We don't think about that much. We're all fellow worshipers of Jesus Christ, and that's where it's really important to be, I think.
That is a very special thing.
Right.
So if you're just joining us, we're about to wrap up, but this is the Encounter program through the Broome County Council of Churches. I'm Reverend Rachel Helgeson. I'm the pastor at Northminster Presbyterian Church in Endwell, New York, and I have with me today Reverend John Helgeson and Ann, and they are both from Masonville Federated Congregation Church. If you heard a little bit, it's from American Baptist Church and Presbyterian Church, and they are celebrating their 200th year of ministry and life together, and all that has meant. And it's been such a rich conversation to hear a little bit about from them how they've brought buildings together. I mean, I moved about 1.5 years ago into a house, and to just do that with one family, I can't imagine bringing everybody together, but they did it and they made it happen. To hear a little bit about the history of Masonville and where that's located, and also to know about their ministry and how that's been an outreach within their community, but also in the broader community of faith. And we're so glad that they're able to be here, especially on my first hosting day. So
Yay, thank you, Rachel. Thank you. We appreciate that, and thank you, Rachel.
Is there anything else that you wish that, if I could say one more thing about our congregation, I wish people knew about this?
Very caring, very caring.
And I would say, if you want to take a nice drive some Sunday, come out and visit us.
Come visit us.
Our church is at 11, and we have a great time and nice fellowship, and come and say hi.
Thank you so much, and I'm so glad you all are here with us today for Encounter. We're looking forward to seeing how this year shapes up, and I'll get to know you all a little bit better as our broadcasting viewership. And I know the Broome County Council of Churches loves that this is part of our ministry to you. We love hearing from you. We love learning a little bit more about who you are and also who is in our community of faith, and to hear that folks can get along together and make it happen like this congregation in Masonville. So I really appreciate you both talking about this, and it's amazing to me that you have managed to get these buildings together, that you managed to bring people of faith from different congregations together, and also to hear that you've oscillated between different types of pastors and to make that part of your mission and ministry. Right. And do you think, Reverend Helgeson, that that's been an uplifting thing too for you as a new person on their journey?
Yes, but as part of the Federated scenario, one pastor is Baptist, the next pastor is Presbyterian. They go back and forth. So now I'm the Presbyterian interim, and make it possible for the Presbyterian pastor to come next.
Okay, that's wonderful. And so there will be a Presbyterian pastor full-time, as called an installed pastor. Is that the language you use?
There'll be an installed pastor of some sort, yes.
Of some sort, okay.
Right.
Keep in mind, I'm a Presbyterian too, so I'm still learning language. It's funny, I have friends from all sorts of denominational and interfaith backgrounds, but it's interesting how you get used to saying things in your own way, but to be reminded that it's broader than that. And
Absolutely.
And it sounds like you all have figured that out. Even when we're talking about the Apostles' Creed, you're like, well, why we need to get stuck on if that's Baptist or Presbyterian? It's just what we do.
Right.
That's a beautiful thing, and I think so instructive. I wish that we could do that in all sorts of other places in our lives, not just in church, but in the broader world, to be able to say, why are we getting stuck on this? How can we talk to each other and just be present with one another in faith? And it sounds like you all are certainly living that out.
Well, we're working in that direction and trying to keep that a focus, but it's not always easy.
Oh no, it's never. Right. Yeah, when you have more than 2 or 3 people in the room.
That's right. Right.
But it sounds like you're doing it, and you're being conscious of it, and I think that's something that I hope other folks can take from this. And we are so appreciative of you being here, and we're thankful for the Encounter program and to be able to hear stories like this one. So. Again, my name is Reverend Rachel Helgeson. I'm the pastor at Northminster Presbyterian Church. I'm so glad to be with you today and to have my friends from Masonville Federated congregation be with you as well. Thanks be to God for this, and thanks be to God for the life of the Broome County Council of Churches as we look forward to other programming, to hear stories from our broader community of faith, to hear what God is doing in all sorts of ways and spaces and places in Broome County and beyond, and to see how we can work together. I hope that you will consider this and make this part of your day. God's blessings to you, and go now in peace. Thanks be to God for your ministry and life in the Encounter program.